Absolutely, there's a bit of a wait and see approach, and where we're seeing the most activity is where there are immediate concerns around health and safety. So, for example, regulations around autonomous vehicles and drones. But we're also starting to see regulators examine whether robots should have electronic personhood. So the EU Parliament is considering that at the moment, or whether algorithms themselves need to be regulated.
Well, at a time where people are still kind of obsessing over the classic trolley question, which is, should the autonomous vehicle hit the tree or hit the crowd? But electronic personhood? I mean, what is that about? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, that classic question is a bit of a rabbit hole. As odd as electronic personhood for robots might sound, actually the regulators are attempting in part to articulate how liability might be assigned so that the classic question can be resolved and people can move on. It's an effort to set the atmospherics of trust at a societal level, so highly useful technology like autonomous vehicles can be more readily adopted. We saw a similar policy intervention in e-commerce back in the early 2000s, which allowed that technology to take off. In the end, I think we'll see regulators respond in areas where AI decision-making will impact areas of personal concern, such as employment or recruitment, lending, education, healthcare, housing and safety. So we're moving from an expectation of privacy to an expectation of explanation.
That's really interesting, and it's very in line in terms of the investments and prioritizations that we're at Accenture putting around explainable AI.
Deb, why don't you walk us through what explainable AI is?
I really like DARPA's definition, which is they explain it as the ability of machines to be able to explain the rationale, to characterize the strengths and weakness for a particular decision-making process, and more importantly, convey a sense of how they will behave in the future.
As I mentioned, there's some debate as to whether or not algorithms themselves need to be regulated. Do you think that explainable AI is in response to a concern around the inscrutability of AI black boxes?
I definitely do. I put it this way when I try to explain to clients or technologists who rightfully point out that AI today can't explain itself. And I realize that that's the reality, but also imagine another reality where really personal decisions are being made by AI, impacting things like employment, etc., that you had talked about earlier. So how do you think a consumer would respond? You go in for a mortgage, you apply for it, you get a rejection, and when you ask for the reason why you're rejected, the robot just shrugs. I mean, what are they going to think about that?
Computer says no? No thanks.
No, exactly. So it's what you were talking about before around that expectation of privacy, kind of moving from that we all know about, and then moving to this expectation of explanation. Are you seeing anything like that in the EU?
We're seeing this already in the debate around whether the General Data Protection Regulation provides EU citizens with a right to explanation whenever a decision is made solely by an algorithm. But even without that question, consumers will vote with their feet and they'll actively avoid companies that use AI that just won't explain themselves, or they'll seek some sort of recourse if it doesn't make sense. So I think whether or not the regulation has a right to explanation, companies are going to be at a competitive advantage if they adopt explainable AI and future-proof their AI systems to anticipate the right to explanation.